okay, Barry, I think we've been going about this entirely the wrong way. See, you're a vampire, clearly. And as a lot of people have mentioned, there's a bunch of different ways to kill a vampire, right? I mean, fire was, in fact, one of them. We tried that last time. That didn't work. But there is a laughable number of things that can eliminate a vampire. There's so many things. But it seems like the most popular thing is wooden stake through the heart, right? Okay. Well, I don't happen to have any wooden stakes lying around. I'm not a vampire hunter like the great Abraham Lincoln. But I do have something that might work, and it's also maybe more appropriate because you're a lot smaller than your average vampire. I have these toothpicks, which make a really cool sound in this little container. All right, hold on. Move my mic over here. Okay. And just going to position that right there. Huh. All right. Well, it looks like we seem to be dealing with the Alucard immune to all vampiric weaknesses sort of creature here. So, hey, it was worth a shot. It was worth a shot. All right. Well, we got a few other things we could try. All right, so moving right along into the new world with our first paramecia after the time skip, we're talking about the target fruit, or in Japanese, the Mato no Mi. Mato no Mi. That sounds familiar. So I think in Japanese, my name, Matt, would be said as Mato, just like two katakana characters. I think that's how it would go. There's also a character in Elbaf we just learned recently was named Mato, the waitress who was essentially the Elbaf version of Makino at that pub that was hanging out with Colin, and then Shanks was there. Yeah, her name is also Mato, okay? So that's an interesting parallel, I suppose. But anyway, yeah, the target fruit wielded by Vander Decken the Ninth. He's not a good character. He's actually a real shit character. But his devil fruit is, what he makes up for being an awful character in his rather mediocre devil fruit that I guess it could be good in a lot of situations. Don't get me wrong. It's one of those where after the ability is explained and the limitations are explained, to be like, yeah, if somebody else had that power, they could probably make really good use out of it. In fact, I have a few names of some characters, or actually one character in particular that would be really, really good with this power, okay? So, yeah, I mean, it's a really specific ability. Vander Decken touches a particular target, marking them, as it were, and then any object that he then subsequently throws, it doesn't matter where he throws it, in what direction, it will automatically lock on to that target and head directly towards them. Now, there are a couple of rules here, and the first time reading through the Fishman Island arc, I was kind of confused on how this ability works. Let me walk you through it. After reading into everything and going back and seeing all the different moments in the manga where he utilizes the ability, it's a little bit more clear, but, you know, he doesn't actually, I think, say certain things about his power that would make it, you know, like, just right away, this is how it works, okay? So this is the first problem I had with it, all right? So he has to use one of his hands to mark a target. And then if he touches another target, that overrides the first target. That replaces that target with his hand, okay? He can only have as many targets, as many hands as he has, which in Vander Decken's case is just 2. So I love how he had to clarify that, by the way. It's like, I can only use this ability for as many hands as I have, so 2. But you think about this for 2 seconds and you realize pretty quickly, wait a minute. So if you had somebody in this One Piece world that had multiple arms, then this ability would be extraordinarily amplified by that. And I was thinking, like, okay, who has the most arms in the One Piece world, right? Not counting Zoro when he uses Ashura. I don't think that includes that. But in this case, I would say it's probably Hachi. Hachi is an octopus fishman, and he has 6 arms. Okay, so that's pretty neat. If Hachi had the target fruit, probably would not eat it because, as with Vander Decken, he's also a fishman. So when he ate the power, he can no longer swim anymore, which is like a huge advantage that fishmen have. That's the reason why, like, it was stated in SBS, like, what fruit would Jinbei eat? And I think they said, oh, he would have like a Tori no Mi. He would eat a bird zone. But really, he wouldn't eat any devil fruit at all because, you know, he would have to give up the ability to swim. And that's something that, you know, would be really difficult to do. So, yeah, Vander Decken Decken had a problem where he had to go around wearing like the bubble coating because he couldn't, go underwater for that reason. But if he did, he would have the power to shoot at 8 different targets simultaneously, vastly increasing the output and the amount of utility of this fruit, I would say, right? Well, anyway, going back to the ability, and the thing that confused me was Vander Decken will often wear gloves whenever he doesn't want to touch something to mark as the target, okay? Because that will override the previous target. The main target throughout all of Fishman Island is Shirahoshi, and that's the person that he, activated the ability with like 10 years prior, and he wants to maintain that connection so he can constantly be throwing axes and whatever horrible thing at Shirahoshi, okay? So the question I had was, wait a minute, so Shirahoshi became the target, and if he touches anything else, that overrides the target. Well, if he picks up a hammer or an axe or whatever to throw at Shirahoshi, doesn't that therefore make the hammer the new target? Or, if you want to even think about it another way, even the glove, So he's like, all right, Shirahoshi's the target. Hody Jones wants to shake his hand in this like pirate alliance that he's starting, and Vander Decken is like, whoa, a handshake. Okay, well, hold on a minute. I got to put my glove on, right? And Hody's like, okay, whatever. And so Decken puts on a glove, and it's just like, oh, wait a minute. The glove should therefore now be the new target because he's touching the glove. So I was really confused by how this works, and the explanation is so obvious. It's just never directly explained in the story, but it seems to be this, and it's super simple. His ability only works on living things, as in he can only make living things the target of his ability. Inanimate objects do not count. That seems to be the rule. Once again, I don't think it's ever explicitly stated, but that seems to be the rule, because otherwise you would just have this infinity loop where it's like, oh, Shirahoshi, you're the target of this hammer. I will now pick up the hammer. Oh, wait, now the hammer is the new target of the hammer. Oh, wait a minute. How does that work? So that's the way around it, right? Now, there's still another thing that doesn't make sense. Well, it can make sense, but it's another thing to bring up, okay? So we'll just assume that only living things can be targets of the Matomato no Mi. Okay. At one point in the manga, at one point during the arc, he picks up random human pirates and uses his ability to throw them at the palace. That's how they got their men into the palace. Literally just using his Devil Fruit ability to yeet people over to Ryugu Palace. They were slamming into the wall. A lot of them died, and some of them were able to kind of get back up with grievous injuries to invade the palace, right? And they were human pirates, so they didn't really care about their well-being. That was like their first invasion force, okay? So only living things can be the target, and therefore the things that you throw at that target can be inanimate objects, and they can also be living things. I don't know how this works. Yeah, I don't know how that works. I mean, unless you could be like really like, okay, well, those pirates that he threw at Hard Shell Tower where Shirahoshi was, maybe Vander Decken just grabbed them by like the scruff of their clothing and then threw them that way, and so it didn't count. I mean, I guess you could just get around it like that, but still, it's like a little bit of a question on exactly how that works. Whatever he throws, even if it's in the opposite direction, it'll back around. Not necessarily at the shortest amount of like the most optimal direction to go back to the target. It does actually still play with momentum and inertia and other terms in physics that I'm not 100% familiar with. For example, when he threw that giant axe with the rose on it at Shirahoshi, the implication was that that axe was spinning a lot, sending it toward Shirahoshi, and so the momentum of that stuck. And we've even seen that when objects go through water, that doesn't slow them down. So there's a mix of like, okay, Vander Decken throws something, and when he throws it, he adds a spin onto it. So that rotation, that spin, maintains throughout the entire duration that this thing is traveling toward its target, okay? Even if it hits the water does not slow it down. It keeps spinning. And in fact, it seems to speed up more and more and more the further the distance is between the target and the thing you threw. Okay, because eventually when that axe reached the tower, and Luffy was there, thankfully, and he was able to jump up and block the axe from hitting Shirahoshi, Luffy had to struggle a little bit at that. It wasn't as simple as just like, oh, I'm just going to punch the axe really quick and knock it away. Luffy jumped up and like grabbed it and was like, ah, and then he kind of like knocked it away, but he also got knocked away in the process, and he kind of was like, whoa, what was that thing? You know what I mean? So there was a little bit of a top spin on that. There was a little bit of force behind that axe, and Luffy had to exert a little bit of effort. Not saying Luffy had to exert a crazy amount of effort. Luffy didn't have to jump into gear second or gear third to stop that thing, but, you know, he did get knocked back a little bit from it, okay? There was some oomph behind it, as it were, okay? We also see the scene when he targets Hachi with his other hand. That's the hand he kind of keeps free to, like, whatever target he wants at that particular moment. And he threw a bunch of arrows up in the air. The arrows then immediately, you know, focused on Hachi, and they zoned in on him, okay? Interestingly enough, because we've seen that, like, for example, just because he targeted Shirahoshi doesn't mean he gets to control what specific spot on her body the weapon hits. At one point, he throws a knife at her, and the knife doesn't hit her like dead center or in the head or anything. It just hits her in the shoulder, so that's something he cannot control. But oddly enough, something he did was apparently able to control. When he threw all those arrows up in the air, the arrows aimed with the bolt side, you know, the arrowhead side facing Hachi, and even when Hachi jumped into the water, they didn't slow down, and they all pierced him, okay, eventually. Now, there are ways to avoid the ability. Vander Decken even says, you know, it's not a guarantee. Whatever objects he throws are able to go around, like, objects. So, like, for example, if he throws something at you and you run around a corner, they're not just going to slam into the wall. They will go around the corner, kind of like following your trajectory a little bit. However, if a wall were to spring up, like, right in front of you, like, immediately, or if somebody like Luffy were to grab the object very quickly and react fast enough, then they will stop, okay? So when Luffy blocked the axe that was hitting Shirahoshi, it was supposed to hit Shirahoshi, and he knocked it onto the floor, it's not like after he knocked it on the floor, it got back up and began to follow and attack Shirahoshi again, okay? The inertia had stopped. Everything had stopped at that point. I'm like, okay, the ability ended. It just falls to the floor like, you know, like a regular weapon or something. It doesn't have the effect of the target fruit anymore, okay? So let's say Hachi was able to react quick enough, like he had really good observation or something, like the arrows were coming at him, he might be able to, like, and, like, grab the arrows really quick before they could actually hit him, instead, like, stopping the attack. If he was able to react quick enough with observation, then that would nullify the ability. So another aspect of this seems to be whenever he does throw something, it's based off of, like, his own throwing, like, energy, I guess, like the actual, like, initial force or acceleration he puts on the object when he's throwing it, okay? So, like, with a hammer, he could just pick up a hammer and throw it, and it will speed up, like I said. But then we have really, really big objects, like the Noah, which he doesn't even really throw the Noah, because the Noah is this huge, huge structure. He just kind of goes up and just kind of, like, taps it. And that's enough to get the Noah to, like... But the Noah moves at, like, a very slow pace. It moves at an incredibly slow pace, as if, like, a single person is, like, pushing this object through the water, okay? And that's why it takes so long to reach Fishman Island and kind of change it does seem to speed up throughout the arc. I don't know if that's intentional, if that's just how it goes or whatever. Just like all the other objects, though, like I said, the other objects do seem to speed up the more that they're en route to a thing. So maybe the same thing with the Noah, but it just moves very, very slowly compared to, like, the axe or the hammer or anything else that Vander Decken throws. So that is also a factor there. I don't know, like, drag force. That's a thing, right? Drag force? That's probably it right there. That's a term I heard before in physics. But yeah, just to give you one more explanation of something, and then we'll move on to the awakening of this power. Let's say you were to throw a hammer. So let's say the target is back that way, and I'm throwing the hammer this way. The hammer will not, like, as soon as it leaves my hands, will not zip back to the person behind me, okay? That what will happen is I will throw it. Seems like the initial throw will go all the way through, like, it'll go that way to an extent, and then it will curve like a boomerang and then loop back around to wherever the target is. That seems to be how it works. Also, As we saw when Hody utilized it this way, the objects are not like conscious or aware that like Vander Decken is the one throwing them. So if Vander Decken throws an object and then the object's coming back and then Hody like picks him up and puts Vander Decken in the path of the target, he's gonna get hit by it. Like, that's how it goes. So that's like a problem. You got to be careful here, because this own ability can be used on you, against you, very easily if you're not careful or if you're an idiot. Vander Decken was both. So talking about an awakening with this power, I think it would actually be extraordinarily devastating, especially if certain restrictions were lifted from it. So let's just assume the most broken version of this I can imagine is you've awakened the ability, you can influence things around you, and within a particular range around you, let's say within like 50 meters or something, anything that you specify as your target is instantly marked as your target. Like, you don't even have to physically come in contact with it. That would be broken, right? So let's say, for example, Vander Decken, or whoever would have this power in the future if it's not Vander Decken, maybe one of Blackbeard's crew will get it. I don't know. Or maybe Hachi will get it. I'd rather prefer Hachi have this ability. But let's say you're fighting in a forest with a bunch of trees. You can, like, without even coming in contact with the trees, you could basically just, like, maybe point at them. Or maybe just looking at them would be enough, and you could be like, that tree right there is a target, and everything I throw will be at that tree. Maybe you could set up, like, sequential targets. So, like, if you throw multiple objects at the same time, you get to choose, like, target number 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. Like, you have a limited, maybe not like an infinite, but, like, yeah, a limited number of targets. Like, let's say, if you have 2 arms, maybe 2 targets you could set anywhere you want, though. It doesn't revolve around physical contact, okay? So, especially if you're fighting an enemy, you could just square up against fighting Luffy, and then Luffy has a big target placed on him with a big number 1 on it, and so he's the first target. And then Zoro shows up, and then it's like, oh, Zoro, you're the next target, and a big number 2 with Zoro shows up on his body, and that's the new target, right? It's kind of similar to Sniper's ability in Yu Yu Hakusho, now that I'm thinking about it, with like putting the crosshairs on people's bodies. Yeah, it kind of like that sort of situation, right? The Matomato no Mi would be more of a supplementary thing here. What really matters is what you are throwing. Because if you know hockey really, really well, and you could pick up a knife, and you could charge that knife up with armament hockey, and then use the Matomato no Mi to throw it at somebody and it hits them, you know, yes, the Matomato no Mi helped, but the bulk of the damage is going to come from the fact that you're using hockey on a projectile weapon. There you go. Could you combine this ability with a gun? Oh, dude, Usopp having this ability would actually be really cool now that I'm thinking about it. You know, Oda mentioned that Usopp having the pocket fruit would be his go-to ability, but really the target fruit would also be really highly up there, especially if Usopp awakened the ability, and let's say he could place multiple targets on anywhere he wants in a battlefield. You know, like he goes up and squares up against a huge army, and they all have those targets placed on them, so then Usopp can just, you know, stand off to the side and just fire off his shots, you know, in whatever direction, and they're flying around the battlefield. Maybe one target could jump to another one, like it hits somebody, and then it immediately bounces to the next target, immediately bounces to the next target, so we get, like, chain damage going on here, like that. See, there's some applications of this. This can get very video gamey, RPG very quickly, you know what I mean? Like, he's like, 17 combo hit, boom, 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 you know, like something like that. Like, that would be fun. That would be a cool use for this ability. It's just Vander Decken really didn't use it all that, you know, unique. You know, the most unique thing he did was he picked up a boat and threw it. It was a big boat. Granted, it was a really big boat, probably the biggest boat in the entire world, but still, he just picked up a boat and threw it. That was kind of it, right? But yeah, the awakening of this power, and in the hands of somebody that has more hands, now you got a Devil Fruit ability that I think is rather dangerous in the right or maybe wrong hands, let's say. Like, dude, like, even if, like, Mihawk had this ability. Mihawk doesn't even use projectile weapons. He just has a sword, which, hey, a sword can be used as a projectile weapon, right? He could just use the sword and just throw that and hit somebody. That would be an insta-kill just doing that, right? So, yeah. A lot of different people that could have this ability other than Vander Decken. Let's have Vander Decken die and then go and then have the fruit reincarnate into somebody else. So here's something funny. I went back and checked this. Hordy and his crew all turn really old because they overdosed on the energy steroid, basically, right? Vander Decken was in the exact same prison cell as them, But from my knowledge, throughout the entire Fishman Island arc, Vander Decken was not taking the steroids. He was like, no, guys, I mean, I'll join up with you, but I'm not taking the steroids. I don't want to be on roids. And Horty and Zio and everybody were like, yeah, whatever, loser. Oh, no. And they're just downing the energy steroids like crazy. So they all age, and that's the state that they're in right now. But when they do, when like Neptune's guards go back to see what happened to them, we don't see Vander Decken in the cell anymore. It's just assumed that he's unconscious and he's not there. I mean, he's still there, but we just didn't see him in that scene. But yeah, we didn't see him grow super old. He's still probably in jail along with all the other new Fishman pirates. Yeah, I don't know. Other than that, or maybe he died of his injuries, because he did get injured pretty bad. I mean, Horty stabbed him, and then he got hit by his own attack and everything like that. So Horty definitely like gave him some grievous wounds. So if you want to say Vander Decken just died in prison, that totally makes sense to me, and then the fruit can be reincarnated somewhere else. Let's go with that. All right, thanks for watching, everybody. This will be Teching 101 signing out. What's the next vampiric weakness we're going to try on Barry here? Let's see. How did they kill Alucard again?